Okay, we're going to make a start because we've got quite a good number of people on the session now. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. My name's Sue Williams. I'm representing PPMA today. I'm one of their board members, and we're really grateful to have McLean here with us. With a big welcome to Jonathan, Alexa, and Alina, who are going to talk us through a session called Beyond the Usual Suspects. So we've added Beyond, which I think is a really interesting subject for a Friday, just to take us out of your usual day-to-day work and reflect on equality and diversity issues in local authorities. I am going to hand over really quickly because time is limited today, but just to remind everybody that this session is recorded. There will be an edited version available to other people, but we do edit out the Q&A and those types of things, so don't let that worry you. But we really encourage you to spread the word and to tell your other colleagues about the session. If you think it's interesting, it's there available for you to have perhaps a conversation in your team meetings. So without further ado, I think I'm handing over to Jonathan. Jonathan, thanks again for your support today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Sue. And on behalf of my colleagues, Alina and Alexa here today, we're delighted from McLean Public to be here to go through some thoughts and suggestions, really, in terms of increasing diversity for local authorities and their partners. And we have called it Beyond the Usual Suspects for a reason which we'll come on to later in the presentation. And diversity and resetting the dial for senior appointments in local government and their partners is a subject for us at McLean Public very close to heart. It's why our organisation was set up, and it's something we have real track record in what we do as a recruitment firm. If we go to the first slide, this is what we're going to go through today. So I don't know if anybody remembers a band called ABC in the 1980s. I certainly do. They had a song called That Was Then, But This Is Now. And I want to just say a little bit about what things were like 10, 15 years ago in local government and what is the current state of play now. For those that don't know me, actually, I used to work for 5 local authorities in the 90s and the hit 2000 as well. And then a bit about the ongoing challenge for what we perceive to be that, and then a bit about best practice and tips and ideas and suggestions of where to go to, and then time for some questions and best practice suggestions. If you do have questions though as we go through, please do just shout and speak them out. I'll be really delighted to take them as we go through. Just a bit of an anecdote, which is a true anecdote. So in 2010, I was doing a chief executive recruitment process for a northern county. And for those that remember, in those days, it was very frequent. You would have a dinner panel in the evenings for chief execs to meet members and various different stakeholders. And I remember, and I still have not forgotten, which is why I'm mentioning it now, one of these senior politicians leaned over to me and said to me, "Shall we invite all the candidates to bring their wives?" And actually, when you think about it, that comment feels like it should be relating to the 1950s rather than 2010. But it just shows, I think, how different things have been since then and how far we have come. So let's look a little bit about 2014. So there was a study took place in 2014 which revealed that local government ethno-cultural diversity leadership was so low, it almost defies analysis. That report also found that actually it's not just disappointing but alarming, but there appears to be no change in the pipeline. So one of the things that I know colleagues from PPMA are keen to do is to develop more diverse talent pipelines in their organisations. This report concluded it's impossible to see where the majority of CEOs in 2034 or 2044 are going to come from. So this was a pretty stark situation back in 2014. Let's move forward though to 5 years ago. So, and just to give you a little bit of a sense, by the way, back in 2014, there was only one chief exec who was BAME in London. And actually, there are very few in those days, very few female CFOs or director of corporate resources. And actually, also, you could, out of the 362, I think, local authorities at that time, you could count the number that were LGBTQ plus on one hand. So that gives you a little bit of a sort of sense there. Moving forward to 2018, still really a disappointing picture, or one might say room for improvement, certainly. In the top 20 senior management positions, you'll see there, only 3.7 were held by Black and ethnic minority leaders. I mean, which is pretty stark when you consider the situation to be at that stage, 13% of the population of the UK was non-white. And then you also see there women occupying only 39% of the top 20 posts in local government. And then you'll see a little bit of a breakdown there in terms of those top 20 senior positions in different types of council. The London Borough one looks good, doesn't it? Sort of on the face of it. But actually, the population then, is non-white population in London was almost 40%. So it shows a start piece there. And then this final quote I wanted to give to you was, at the time, it's changed since Deborah Cadman arrived as chief exec at Birmingham, but at the time, in 2020, there was an open letter by an employee at Birmingham City Council bemoaning the fact that all told 12 chief officers in the authority were white, despite the city itself being 42% non-white. So still a situation 5 years ago, that improvement was lots of room again, still for improvement there. Let's move to, but this is now. So interestingly, the UK population, of course, continues to change. 18% of the UK's population is now from ethnic minority groups. Real contrast across the UK, and of course PPMM members represent that from where they are, whether they're in North Wales or they're in Essex today. 69.2 in terms of Newham, over in district in Cumbria, 1.5. Interestingly, and with the team we were discussing this yesterday, the area which is most ethnically diverse outside of London is Slough. But the great news, and this is the positive messages, I think, really, is that the LGA, Solace, PPMA, of course, colleagues at PPMA, and also London Council have done great work really addressing this topic and really increasing by their efforts and local councils and HR professionals themselves, the leadership and representation of women, Black and minority ethnic groups, and also LGBTQ people in senior positions. Also, interestingly, and I'll be interested in any comments that colleagues have later, there's a greater understanding of supporting people with disabilities, increasing focus on socioeconomic inclusion and neurodiversity. I'm sure also in all your councils or organisations you work in across the public sector, you'll have network groups, support groups, and in terms of promoting diversity. I put down here Nottinghamshire County Council and Croydon and Bristol because they've often been mentioned in dispatches for having particularly good groups in terms of doing that. But there's still an ongoing challenge. And, you know, interestingly, it starts from the top. The Fawcett Society and Democracy Close, they did an assessment very recently. It got quite a lot of publicity in The Guardian and a couple of other newspapers, and The Telegraph, I think, and The Mail, if I remember, about the breakdown of councillors in terms of their backgrounds. And actually, at the moment, I think it still stays very similar since the elections in 2023 May. 8.3% of councillors overall in the UK are from minority ethnic backgrounds, which, when you think about it, given the piece is very low. I have to give a shout out here to Brent, though. Brent is 66.7, the London Borough of Brent. This figure drops to 1.8 in Wales and 0.4 in Scotland. The Scotland figure, if anybody is here from Scotland, is very interesting because that's 10 times less than it should be in terms of proportionality. In terms of gender equality, the Fawcett Society also revealed that only 18 out of the 382 councils that currently exist had representation at parity with women and men. And they also concluded, interestingly enough, that actually 50-50 on current trends, 50-50 representation was very unlikely until 2051, so some time away from now. Very interesting examples as well. So Brighton Hove City Council, I'm currently in Brighton today, hello everyone, but Brighton, people may know, is very diverse, but that until May this year had no black or ethnic minority councillors at all, which is interesting when you think about that some of the cities that make up the UK. So Solace, and to conclude on the ongoing challenge, Solace still concluded that local government this year is making painfully slow progress in building representative teams. And it also said, I think this is true from our working with the clients that we work with, that the more senior the position, the less likely it is that they're going to be representative of the local working population. So that concludes in terms of the ongoing challenge that we see it from McLean Public in terms of resetting that dial for diversity and leadership. So let's think about what we can do in terms of best practice. So here's some ideas that I'm sure you're all doing already, but we just thought it'd be useful, particularly because this set of slides gets circulated to colleagues. It's important to ensure job descriptions and materials are bias-free. And there's organisations, of course, and we do this quite a lot, can help on that. And then also it's important to ensure diversity in all recruitment panels. Westminster City Council is notable in terms of how it does that. And then all hiring staff should be up to date with the latest HR guidance and also diversity best practice. And when we say hiring staff, really, I think it's to do, we also include in their members in terms of what that should be. All hiring staff should be trained in unconscious bias. This has been controversial recently, hasn't it, of course, because the central government has made some very public announcements of not wishing to pursue this for the civil service. However, in our view, it is something which is important. If you want to think about different people who could do that, we would point you to the National Centre for Diversity. They would have recommendations for you. And then the other point here is that all reasonable adjustments should be made for candidates wherever possible. And of course, that goes without saying. And more broadly, colleagues, one of the things we would ask you to check out, if you haven't already, is the great work that the LGA have done in terms of called Diverse by Design. And it's a document that you'll find on their website, which is 15 key steps to embed fairness in the organisation. It's worth giving that a look. And we would also ask and encourage people to look beyond the protected characteristics in terms of when you're thinking about diversity in senior recruitment. You remember the point earlier about neurodiversity, for example. Think laterally in terms of advertising. There's a real sense, back to this point of usual suspects, there's often a real sense of let's just go to the usual places we advertise. There's lots of different routes you can use. And this links into using diverse networks. So, for example, for those that are doing regeneration appointments, it's worth checking out Bayman Property, a really interesting organisation that has some real networks for you to tap into when looking for good people. And also Women on Boards are a really good source for looking for potential candidates when you're looking for boards for your arm's length bodies or different organisations like that. And the other thing we would say, just to close on, is to avoid tokenism. One of the things that's important for all of us is to ensure that everybody has a fair chance of securing the opportunities they would like, and that applies in every sense. So I hope that gives you a bit of an introduction in terms of some of our thoughts and our observations in terms of diversity in senior positions and how you can really facilitate and ensure best practice, and also the history to date of where we currently are. I'm very happy to take any questions, or do any colleagues have any suggestions of what's worked for them in the past?
Jonathan, can I ask a question? It's Sue Williams.
Yeah, of course.
Can I, and this is because I'm really interested in the data, and some of those statistics were pretty shocking, weren't they? What can you just, I might have missed it, just tell me a bit more about the data source and whether there's the ability to drill down more locally. I'm thinking about Greater Manchester where I work, and it would be really good to be able to, you know, show that hard evidence in our environment on a Northwest or a Greater Manchester.
Yes, the government's recently, Kemi Badenoch is the Minister for Women and Equalities, and actually she's just produced an update on diversity in the UK. It's an update on last year's inclusion strategy, the British inclusion strategy. So it's worth having a look at that. The Fawcett Society is a good source in terms of some of the Sue, in terms of some of the data in terms of councillors. Green Park are a good source in terms of some of the studies that I referred to earlier on, and Solace have also done some work alongside colleagues with PPMA as well. So there's quite a few data sources there, and I've cross-checked and referenced them, but there's quite a few, but they're all in the public domain.
Great, that's really interesting. I'm definitely going to look up some of those, and I put a little link into the Diverse by Design document, which is something I'm familiar with, but it's definitely worth a read, that one, isn't it? It's really got some clear, strong tips.
Very much so. And I think one of the things for colleagues to just to bear in mind, there's a lot of best practice to draw upon. It's sometimes you just need to know where to look if you follow, but there definitely is, because I think lots of organisations are doing their best to also support colleagues in this journey.
So if anyone's got any other questions, I've got loads. How would I talk about elected members next? Because that's a really interesting. And again, before I monopolise, has anyone else got any other questions? I want to put their hands up or make an observation. No, I feel free to carry on. Jonathan, how do you tackle that older white British male mentality stereotype of an elected member or a councillor, and who's doing that particularly well in your experience?
Oh, that's a very good question, and I'd invite colleagues from around the country also to chip in with any kind of observations they've had. And I say around the country on purpose, because it really varies around the country, I have to say. And I think there are some sort of attitudes that still are very conventional, I think is the way I'd put it. But actually, many elected members now are inclusive by nature, and also bring their community experience to bear when in all manners, in every aspect of the role of a councillor. So to answer your question directly, we would politely challenge, is the way we would put it, but also politely challenge. But also, back to your point, you made a really good point, so about facts. Sometimes facts speak for themselves, don't they? And that's what we've always seek to demonstrate, the good business sense or the factual nature of the recommendations we make to clients in terms of what our suggestions are.
Yeah, you really can't argue with some good data to sort of strengthen those conversations. Jennifer, do you want to come in? I can see your hands up.
Yeah, I'll pop my video on, but I am on my phone because I've got two screens going at the same time. Hi, from London Council. I think when you were talking about elected members, I think that has a strong correlation in sense of the diversity of the borough itself. So I think that's quite key. Secondly, I think the question that I want to ask is, how do we get away, because you spoke about fact, but how do we get away from the perception that if, for example, you have an all-white male top table corporate director level, for example, but actually they may be diverse in other ways? How do we get around of that perception of actually they're just all white male, but you know, you may well have LGBT QT on there, for example, you may have disabilities, but because they're not known facts, as it were, or you can't see it, how do we get away from that perception?
That's a really good question, Jennifer. Just remind me, where are you currently?
Islington Council.
Oh, hi there. Yeah. So I think it's about celebrating that diversity at the top table, and demonstrating that celebration, if you follow. I think that's one of the things I would do, so people are aware that actually the top team is more diverse, or the cabinet is more diverse than one might think. The other thing that's also interesting, one of the studies that also we were looking at is about how positive it is when you've got members of the top team, Jennifer, who are sponsoring some of those network groups I mentioned earlier. That's a really great way of actually increasing visibility of the top team and its how do I put this? Its interest and diversity credentials. It's a really good way to do that.
Well, thank you.
What kind of things are you doing, Jennifer, in that space?
Well, we do have a very diverse member or cabinet anyway, so that we're quite good in that sense. What we're not so good where is our sort of top table corporate management, and I think that's become quite prevalent. We are currently out for our chief executive, so that was a real heavy focus, but is naturally anyway across our recruitment processes. We do have diverse panels. We ensure that our job descriptions are free of any sort of bias. We're actually using AI now to sort of look at those the wordings in that and whether they may relate to male or female, and how inclusive. So I think AI and technology is playing a big part. So there are a variety of different things. We do have a diverse recruiter scheme. We shout about it quite a lot. So I do think it's important, if you've got these things in place, to be able to sort of shout about it so that your wide market know exactly what you're doing and sort of feel confident in your processes.
Yeah, we're barely scraping the surface of AI, but there's loads of it goes back to that evidence and data, and using the tech that you've got to make it easier for everybody to think about bias in the language you use.
And I think consciously or unconsciously, probably more so unconsciously, when job descriptions are written or adverts are written, if it's written by either a male or a female, for example, from a particular background, naturally their thoughts and feelings will or the language that they would normally use would come into play in that. So I think some of the free AI platforms that you can use sort of screen that and then give you opportunities for alternatives, I think in a sense is a step in the right direction.
Great. Thanks, Jenna. I'm going to Google that as soon as I finished. Free ones.
I can sing if you want.
Yeah, that'd be ace. Thank you.
Well, I'll have to do it after because I'm on my phone. I can't get it on my phone. I think so.
Has anyone got any experience of that senior table sponsoring the network groups, and what kind of impact that might have had in your workplace? I think that's a really good suggestion as well, Jonathan.
Hello. Hi, my name is Yone Jackson Benjamin.
Hi, Yone.
Hi, everyone. And as with Jennifer said, we have diverse panels. We also have youth panels, which are made up from our young Newham residents. And Jonathan has already remarked on the diversity of our local area. We also do spend a lot of time by engaging with the networks. And so senior leaders that sit on our corporate management team also sponsor the networks. And that actually ensures from the most junior levels right to the most senior levels that everybody is aware of our commitment to greater diversity. Within Newham, of course, we have our Tackling Racism programme of activities and interventions. And also we offer reciprocal mentoring where our more junior ethnically diverse colleagues are being mentored and are co-mentoring our senior leaders who come from majority backgrounds. So it's a range of different opportunities that are being utilised there. And it is all about how can we demonstrate we are more inclusive as an organisation. So when we are participating, for example, in the National Graduate Development Programme, I'm really proud of the fact that half the graduates that come in are ethnically diverse. And that's a way of developing the leaders of the future too.
I don't know if anyone else is struggling. I got most of that. I think the graduate program's a really good example, but I might have to hook up with you later on to get some more detail on the specific examples you mentioned there.
There's some great examples, really good examples.
Yeah, some line quality issues for me.
Yes, apologies. I'm having system issues today. So happy to have a separate conversation soon.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. Oh, and Jennifer's put that gender decoder into the link as well, which is really positive. Jonathan, any final thoughts from you? We're coming to the end of our half hour now.
Not at all, apart from just to say some positive messages, really, which is about how there is, and we've just had these cases from the two people just speaking then about how there is good practice that people are doing across, particularly PPMA colleagues, and just to access and speak to each other about sharing that good practice. And also when you're doing something new, so for example, some local authorities are now anonymizing CVs and taking names off and dates of birth, etc. You know, that comes with some challenges when you're doing that, about how to do it properly. Speak to colleagues who you know have done that, because actually that sharing of information is one of the beauties, the great things about the PPMA. So that's what we would say, and we're here as well. We're very happy to support you as we can along that journey.
Great, thank you everybody. I'm sorry I pronounced McLean incorrectly as well right at the beginning, but my dad's called McLean and he says McLean, so
don't worry about that at all.
There's kind of a Scottish way or an Irish way or something like that of pronouncing it. But yeah, we're really grateful for your support, and I think an interesting subject to spend half an hour on a Friday afternoon. Our next session is on the 11th of August, if people are interested in tuning in on that one. And it's about work-life balance and productivity in local government, with a specific emphasis on exploring the 4-day week. So I think that's another really relevant subject for us all at the moment. But it's just a final thank you to McLean for joining us today, and to you, Jonathan, for putting the time into preparing that presentation. It's been really interesting, and hopefully people can go away and reflect, and the presentation and the recording will be made available to the group if they want to spread the word on what's such a pertinent topic for us all, I think, at the moment, especially when you have the data presented to you as starkly as you have at the beginning. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, so lovely to meet everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Good luck. Let's keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye.